Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today, inshallah, we will start a new topic in our panel series for the following weeks. And this week, inshallah, we will talk about evil. And each week, we will talk about different aspects of evil and shaitan, devils, and misguidance, and disbelief, and even misfortunes. Inshallah, we will talk about different aspects. And today we will focus on the creation of evil. We see that as evil and bad and harmful, and many people go to hell because of shaitan and the creation of devil. And we will see whether it's really evil or not. And we will try to answer as our first question why people of misguidance always gain the upper hand throughout history. And it has always been the case, and it is the case now. So these are the topics we will focus today. And our speakers are Colin Turner from England and Mustafa Tana from Durham.
Assalamu alaikum.
I will, salam, welcome. Good to see you, Mustafa. And I will, inshallah, read the first question and and then I will come back and we will talk about that and try to answer, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقل ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed, and say, O my sustainer, I seek refuge with you from the whisperings of the evil ones, and I seek refuge with you, my sustainer, lest they should come near me. These are ayat from Surah Al-Mu'minun. First indication, first question. Although evil spirits do not interfere in the universe in any way in regard to creation, and through His mercy and favor, Almighty Allah takes the part of the people of the truth, and the attractive beauties and virtues of truth and reality strengthen and encourage the people of truth, and the repulsive ugliness of misguidance revolts the people of misguidance. What is the reason for Satan's party very often gaining the upper hand? What is the reason for Satan's party very often gaining the upper hand? And what is the wisdom in it? And what is the reason for the people of truth always seeking refuge with Allah from Satan's evil? The answer, the wisdom and purpose is this. For the most part, misguidance and evil are negative, destructive, and pertain to non-existence, while in the great majority of cases, guidance and good are positive, constructive, repairing, and pertain to existence. Everyone knows that one man can destroy in one day a building made by 20 men in 20 days. Yes, although human life continues through the existence of all the basic members and conditions of life, and is particular to the all glorious Creator's power, through severing a member, a tyrant may make the person manifest death. A tyrant may kill the person just by severing a member, which is non-being in relation to life. The saying destruction is easy, has for this reason become proverbial. If the people of misguidance cause some temporary harm, according to the verse, وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, and the end is best for the righteous, everlasting reward and profit make up for the damage. That impregnable stronghold, that fortified citadel, is the Sharia of Muhammad ﷺ and his practices. So we will start with a very interesting question. Although evil spirits do not interfere in the universe in any way, evil spirits, shaitan, and evil spirits do not interfere. They have no part in creation. And Almighty Allah is always behind the believers. And the repulsive ugliness of misguidance revolts the people of misguidance. What is the reason for the Satan's party very often gaining the upper hand. Yes, Mustafa abi, we can start with you. And I want to ask, this question. And we see that is it, in the whole human history, right? The Satan's party, Hizbul Shaitan, they always gained the upper hand. What is the wisdom?
I mean, I would like to hear Dr. Turner too, but just I think we need a corrective there. They don't always gain the upper hand. You start saying often or many times, but there are many times that when the party of good or the faction that follows God's guidance gain hand too. So it is not a predetermined end that we have. It's sometimes like that, sometimes like this. But what is surprising is that Satan's party do gain the upper hand sometimes or many times or oftentimes. And Ustad Nursi is expressing the surprise here, like how can that happen? They have no interference in terms of bringing things into existence. God declares himself on the side of those who follow guidance, people of truth who follow haqq, whose conceptions of reality corresponds to what reality is. And truth and reality are beautiful and attractive. Therefore, therefore more people should be attracted to truth and reality. And misguidance is ugly, essentially ugly in itself, ugly. How come then that even if it happened once in history, how come that Satan's party gained the upper hand, even if it happened once? I guess that's the surprise and shock that we receive in the question. And there must be a higher perspective that we need to see this through. And I guess that's what Ustad Nursi is pointing to in his answer. As I said, I would like to hear from Dr. Turner first.
Professor Turner, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah. Bismillah. We need another corrective, actually, before we go any further, and that is the notion that evil can be created. Evil is essentially non-existence. So the notion that evil can be created, I think we talk metaphorically about evil being created, being brought into being, or being allowed to exist is as near as we can get, because there is no creation involved. By the same token, Ustad Nursi sets out right from the beginning his store, and he says that Satan and other jinn don't have any creative role whatsoever. So right from the beginning, he repudiates the idea that there is an evil component to the world itself, that matter is somehow evil, or that evil things or evil states are somehow brought into being either by the devil or by Shaitan, that is, or in some beliefs, by a god of evil or by a demiurge or by some other kind of being. So there's no creative role for Satan or for any of the other Satans, for the satanic horde, the Hizbul Shaitan. So we're talking here about the apparent upper hand that the people of misguidance, the party of Satan, would seem to have in the world. If we look at the world not from the perspective of its existence as a manifestation of the divine names, but if we look at it as a place where the tension between good and evil is played out, then it becomes clear, particularly when we think of that mode of existence that the Quran talks about and describes as al-hayatud dunya. It seems that the people of Shaitan often are calling the shots, they have the upper hand. We know that in our own time, in modern civilization, we have basically, as a collective, we've abandoned tradition. we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater and we've declared God dead, or at the very least, open to question or negotiation. So the effects and the traces of misguidance are superabundant. And this is what causes people of truth to seek refuge with God from the evil of Satan and his allies both among other jinn and among humankind, because human beings freely enter into alliance with evil without compunction, and indeed on a regular basis. But this subject is an extremely complex one, and I don't think that we should underestimate it. It's extremely complex, and it consists of a number of subtopics, and I think that we have to unpack each of them carefully. There is the subject of evil and its place within the cosmic scheme. So what is evil? First of all, we need to get our definitions straight. In or of what does evil consist? What is the ontological status of evil? Is it created? Now, the corrective that I issued at the beginning of my speaking suggests that it's not created. Does it have an external existence? I suggest that it doesn't. How is the presence of evil reconcilable? This is another issue. How is the presence of evil reconcilable with the justice, wisdom, benevolence, and compassion of an all-perfect, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent creator? Then there's the issue of the creation of Satan and the role of Hezbollah Shaitan. So there are other issues, sub-issues if you wish, such as the relationship between evil and the question of human trial and tribulation, imtihan, ibtila, the problem of pain and suffering, the question of qadar and human free choice. All of these issues and sub-issues, they sort of come together. They meld together in a complex network of interconnected truths and interconnected realities. And I think we need to unpack them and understand them properly if we are to avoid confusion. I don't think we should rush this issue by suddenly talking about evil before we've actually defined it.
So, for example, can we give examples like from our real life? Like when we say evil, do we mean like earthquakes or misguidance?
Well, precisely. I mean, there are so-called natural evils, which are not really evil at all. They're only evil in a relative sense. An earthquake, for example, would be deemed evil if it took lives. But if an earthquake happens on the moon, then astronomers will gladly watch it and they will celebrate it as a wonderful cosmic event, and they won't see it as evil at all. So evil is a very relative, very subjective thing. But I do think that we have to pin it down before we can sort of start discussing it. We always discuss things as though we know what we're talking about, definitionally. And I think evil is one of those subjects where it repays our effort if we actually work hard to define it before we start discussing it.
And also another example is given in the example. For example, the life of a man, right? It can be a tyrant may sever a member of a person and then he may kill him. I mean, from like the murder, for example, right? We can talk about that as well. And here, as you said, we can explain more here. The topic, it says the evil are negative, destructive, and pertain to non-existence. And I want to ask this question to Professor Mustafa. Maybe we can take his insight as well. What do we mean by non-existence? We said that misguidance and evil are pertain to non-existence.
Is that to me or to Mustafa?
To Mustafa, but you can.
No. I defer to Mustafa.
Okay, but I don't know if he can hear us now. Do you want to talk about this non-existence point of view? What do we mean by non-existence? For example, even we can give the example of murder or earthquake. Can you give some examples, and can you explain what we mean by non-existence? Evil pertain to non-existence.
Have we lost Mustafa?
Yes, it seems like it.
I think, yeah. I see one Mustafa, but I don't know if he's... Oh, okay. Okay, he just came. I guess he's with us now. Mustafa Jam, can you hear me? He just joined.
Altab, you gotta make him come.
I'm sorry, I dropped out.
Yeah, when we just asked that question, Professor Colin Turner, like we said, the evil they pertain to non-existence. And what do we mean by non-existence? When we, for example, we can give examples as well, like murder or earthquake. How come they pertain to non-existence?
Yes. So, did Dr. Turner give an example, or do you want me to? I'm sorry, I need to catch up.
To you.
Okay. Well, the Ustad gives us a very good example, right? When he gives us the example of the garden. For a garden to produce plants, you need many things to come together, and that is the nature of existence as we know existence in this world, in this system that is created, in the cosmos that has been created for us. There could be other systems, things could have been different, but we are living in this system. This is what was chosen for us among many possibilities, and this system existence depends on in the realm of causes and effects. Existence depends on the many factors coming together. So for a garden to exist, for the plants to grow there, you need sunlight, you need water, you need earth, you need seeds, you need weeding, etc., etc. And when a plant grows as a result of these many factors coming together, then we have the plant in existence that we can see, touch, we can notice it, we can recognize it, we can find it in existence. But if one were to not let water to go to this garden, assume that there is a canal through which water is flowing into the garden, and one were to block the canal and water is not flowing anymore, there you have the absence of water, right? And absence is destructive, because even though all these factors came together, right, they are each a necessary cause, and once you take out one of the necessary causes, you don't have the outcome. The outcome does not come into existence. So that's an example of absence. I'm not sure, again, if Dr. Turner were trying to get to something else, but this is one thing that comes to my mind that Ustad Nursi himself uses as an example.
He also uses the example of buildings, and as the text makes clear, while evil has no creative role, since it pertains to non-existence, it can prove to be extremely destructive and dysfunctional to human flourishing. Ustad uses the example of a building, and I was thinking of the Taj Mahal, which took, I think, 20,000 men over 20 years to actually construct. And yet it's possible for one man with a pile of explosives to reduce, this sublime manifestation of human creativity to a pile of rubble just in a matter of seconds. So what Ustad is talking about here is that we can trigger non-existence through our behaviors. We can bring, it's quite paradoxical. It's like saying we can bring non-existence into being. Of course we can't, because it's non-existent and it's defined by its absence. So, but an absence of anything that is conducive to human flourishing could be said to be evil. So the withholding of water in Mustafa's example of the garden would be an example of non-existence dysfunctional to human flourishing. Or murder is the same, or an earthquake will be deemed to be evil, but it's not evil actually, because it brings about destruction, because it brings about absence. These are the only reasons why we deem these things to be evil. But personally, I don't hold with the existence of natural evils. I think that the only evil, the real evil that we contend with as human beings is the evil that human beings themselves bring about through their negative and destructive behavior. So this category of so-called natural evils, I think that we have to take this out of the equation when we're talking from an Islamic theological point of view. I don't know how Mustafa feels about this, but for me, the notion of natural evil is it's not a helpful category actually. It's actually oxymoronic if you think of it. Natural evil. There can't be such a thing. Natural non-existence doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and our topic is actually, as you said, not natural disasters, but Satan's party very often gaining the upper hand. And for the, I guess, for the earthquakes, when you said earthquake can be destructive and it can destroy all the houses, as you said, 20,000 people built. It can be destructive, but as you said, it's better if you focus on this topic. The fact that very often people of guidance gain the upper hand over believers, and the reason for that.
You may add something to that. When we talk about natural or cosmic evil, as Dr. Turner, as far as I understand, is also alluding to, we are talking about something metaphorical. That's a matter of language because it doesn't exist. And so how do we refer to something that does not exist? We are referring to a system of things and the absence of something in that system. But another way to think about evil, not in an ontological sense, not in the sense of cosmic or natural evil, is in a moral sense. And in a moral sense, in terms of the responsibility of the human being and or the consequences of the non-fulfillment of those responsibilities for the human being, then we can talk about shar. And I'm not sure if translating the word shar as evil in that context fully does the job, right? We can also think of it as sin. We can also think of it as harm. So there are several connotations that are included in the word shar, and by translating it as evil and without contextualizing it, we may be missing some aspects of what we are talking about. So if you could perhaps go to the previous page in the slide, Omar.
Here.
Yes. So when it start asks this question, and what is the reason for the people of truth always seeking refuge with God from Satan's evil, right? It does not seem to be referring to ontological evil, however we will define it, but rather the harm that may come from Satan. Now, the creation of that harm, the process of the creation of that harm may involve something that we can relate to that notion of metaphorically named cosmic or natural or ontological evil, right? But that's not ultimately what these people have in mind. They are seeking refuge with God from the harm that may come to them from Satan. They are recognizing that Satan is man's clear declared enemy, and they have a goal in mind, that is to come closer to God, come near to God, and ultimately to earn his grace in the hereafter. And Satan stands on the way and is trying to pull them, left or right, and making the path dangerous for them, so that they are seeking refuge from Satan for this reason.
I would agree with that. I just don't think that natural evil is a helpful category. I mean, the ontology of evil is basically quite straightforward. Evil is not created. Evil has no external existence. So whether we're talking about so-called natural evil or whether we're talking about moral evil, and of course the true evils are the evils which are wrought by the human hand and which come as an outgrowth of human possession of free choice. So I would say that the real evil that we have to contend with, and again, this evil is non-existent ontologically. I mean, it has no external existence, and that is human moral evil, and that is what we have most of our problems come from that, as you pointed out. And so when people are taking refuge in God from Satan and his party, I think what they are concerned about 99 out of 100 times is moral evil and the havoc that is wrought by the perpetration of moral evils. And I think these are the true evils, well, where we in a sense call into existence non-being and destruction with our behaviors. So I would, as you say, I would absent, or I would minus so-called natural evils such as earthquakes and fires and floods from the equation, and I would concentrate here on moral evil, which can be brought into existence by sin, as you say, by wrongdoing. But even trying to account for sin as a type of evil, I think, is problematic. I think it's the result of human actions which are not oriented towards the pleasure of God. They are the actions which are negative and dysfunctional to human flourishing and can bring about states of non-existence, which are essentially evil.
Yeah, and when you said, if we can give some concrete examples from our everyday lives, as you said, sins, right? And if you compare guidance and misguidance in this world, I want to ask, for example, again, this could be a concrete example. For example, we have in this age, right? We see many people getting away from Allah. They are, busy with entertainment, maybe haram pleasures, and these also I see them as pertaining to non-existence, and they are not apparently they're not constructive, but they are distracting. Whether it be wasting time, right? In that sense, can we think about those? Professor Mustafa, what do you think? Can we give that example from our everyday life?
I'm sure if we can. Maybe we can take it like even more like at a more basic, easier to understand level. Let's think like what could be some kind of sin that we are going to imagine. Like take it a very simple thing that we may each slip into on a daily basis, right? Let's say lying. I mean, I'm not saying that lying is simple. It's a big thing. It's a grave thing, but it is simple in the sense that it just happens with a slip of the tongue all the time, right? So when we lie, we refer to something that does not that does not exist as it exists, and there is an affront to God in the sense that God chose not to bring that into existence, and we are claiming that it exists, right? So we are casting aspersion on God's choice in not bringing it into existence. So what we did by our choice, or as I said, sometimes it may be a slip of tongue, but our choice was not controlling our tongue at the first place, right? What we did by our choice is, one, we misled people, and that may have further consequences. That misleading people to something, other people may take this as truth and do something based on that, and that may lead to something else, and that may lead to something else. But at the core, the seed, right? Ultimately, it may cause the destruction of a country, but the seed at the core of it was something that did not exist, right? We said something, and what we said did not exist. We claim the existence of something that did not exist. Now, because it can lead to all these further consequences, it is evil in the sense that it's very harmful. But even we don't go there at the point when it is just a seed that has not grown, it is evil in the sense that it's casting our aspersion on God, right? So if we tried to come up with a definition, and I'm thinking as we go here, I don't have a preconceived notion of what might work here, but if we tried as a working definition for this kind of evil, it might probably be helpful to think about God's names and attributes, and perhaps think that whatever serves whatever serves the human fulfillment of the human responsibility to witness God's names and attributes in the creation, the manifestation of God's names and attributes, and show them. Right, you have two kinds of responsibilities: to witness it and to show it, to witness it and to present it. Right, whatever serves the fulfillment of that, perhaps we can think of it as khair, as good, and whatever fails the fulfillment of that, perhaps we can think of as shar, as harm or evil.
Yeah, I thought of Mustafa's example of the lie. You know, a lie is basically the creation of an illusion of something that doesn't exist. And the example I'm thinking of, or it can be, I'm thinking of the time that we were told that, and I don't really like to sort of politicize this or personalize it, but I think it's a good example. We were told that there were weapons of mass destruction in some kind of storehouse in Iraq back in 2003. And this illusion was created of things which didn't exist. And this illusion was allowed to mushroom to the point where, you know, people went to war over a lie. Because this lie was propounded in the way that it was, and because it gained currency, it spread throughout millions of minds, and it had an effect politically which was absolutely disastrous, and it led to over 1 million deaths. Now, this was one lie conceived by one human individual, possibly maybe as a matter of deliberation over several months, but there was a decision that was taken to effect an untruth which created in the minds of millions of people illusions that didn't really exist. The illusion of a stockpile of weapons. And the bloodshed that led to is a good example of how a very simple, and Mustafa said it's a simple thing. A lie is a very simple thing. It can be a slip of the tongue. But one single lie by one single human being can lead to death and destruction on a catastrophic scale. And I think that is a very good example of how non-existence can be affected by the behavior and action of a human being.
Yeah, that's a great example of, you know, how evil is destructive and non-existent. And also there's a related question. Also the participants can ask questions through chat, and I see some questions related to this. The question says, Dr. Turner said evil is not created, and he wants some explanation of, you know, when you said evil is not created, and, you know, can you clarify that to, you know, evil being
because what is, for example, with a lie, nothing is created. With an earthquake, nothing. What is created with evil? Sorry, what is created in an earthquake, for example? If we're looking at natural evils, death is a creation, but death is not evil. So if people die in an earthquake, the fact that they die is not evil. And their deaths are created, so death is not evil. And in the case of a lie, what is created when we tell a lie? Nothing.
And when you said the death example, for example, in this case, it's evil. A tyrant is killing a person. And even Ustad Nursi, he says death, which is non-being in relation to life, right? When we compare maybe in comparison to life and in comparison to goodness, evil is non-existent.
Evil is non-existent, yes. Evil, when Ustad says evil is non-existent, it means it doesn't have an external existence. It's not created, and therefore it doesn't have a source. Its source is non-existence. Allah doesn't create evil. Nothing that Allah creates is evil. You know, we can't think of a single example.
Yeah. And in the second question, we will see how even the creation of shaitan, devil, is not evil.
Absolutely.
Creation of evil. Creation
let me take a stab at that too, if I may. Let's imagine we are where I'm living. We are in the fall season. So there might be people in the southern hemisphere too. So I don't want to take it for granted that we are in the fall season. But where I'm living, we are in the fall season, and leaves are falling. So when we say death, we think of the death of a human being, etc. But for each leaf that was alive, that shoot from one branch as a baby at the beginning of spring, and lived the span of its life throughout the summer, and now it is falling. Right, for each one of those leaves, there is death coming. And the leaf turning from green to brown, its stem becoming weak and dry and losing its connection to the branch and falling. If this is our definition of the death of the leaf, that is created, right? That is created. The question is there any evil in this? Is there anything evil about this? Right? The leaf was green, turned brown, and fell from the tree. Where is the evil in this? Why should we assume that there is any evil in this? There is nothing that is evil and that is created in this process. However, if we think of the death of the leaf, i.e. turning brown and falling from the tree, as something that's negative, as something that is that is dislikable, right? There is something evil in it. That thought that we have about the leaf dying and falling, right? That is what we are referring to as evil here, and that is not a created thing. That is just our perception. It is not. And when we use the word create here, well, the word in Arabic that we are using is ijad. And it relates to the word wujud. They both mean existence, right? Bringing into existence from non-existence. That perception is not brought into existence. It does not have substantive existence. It is a perception, and that we are calling it as evil. If you were to look at it from another perspective, however, right? The leaf fell from the tree because the winter was going to be too hard on it and it was going to suffer. This is one way to think about it. Another way is the leaf fell from the tree because the tree wants to rejuvenate, and that's going to happen in the spring. Or another way of thinking, the leaf fell from the tree because there are so many bacteria and enzymes and worms and insects and whatnot that are waiting on the ground to eat it. And it is actually absolute good for them because it is provision. So yes, the death of the leaf was created, but the provision of the earthworm was also created in the process. And where we find the evil in this is a matter that relates to our minds. That's in our mind. That is not out there in the existence that is found substantively in the cosmos.
Yeah, there's another new question just related to what you said. It says, so according to Dr. Turner, anything created by God is not evil. Just like you said, anything created by God is not evil. And when you give the example of leaves, and he says, how do we classify something as evil? Anything created by God is not evil. Anything created by God is not evil, and everything is created by God. And how do we classify something as evil?
That's a very good question. I don't think we actually define evil. Most of the time, it's human beings interpret things as evil which they don't like. So if I lose all of my money, even if I gamble it away, I see it as evil. I no longer have any money. If I lose a child, I see that as evil, terrible. My world comes to an end. You know, these are all subjective judgments, really. What is truly evil is disobedience, and the direct decision to go against what God has asked us to do. So if we tell a lie, then this is in direct contravention of divine decree. So we are deciding to go against God and to do something that we have been asked not to do. That is true evil. Because what we're doing then, we're toying with non-existence, you know. We're asking God to effect for us states of non-existence, such as happens with the lie. So we really do have to be sure what we're talking about when we talk about evil, and particularly when we talk about the creation of evil. What we actually mean is when we say the creation of evil, and even Ustad says it himself, because colloquially we do talk about evil being brought into existence. But in fact, there is nothing which is brought into existence when evil occurs. So what happens when shar occurs? Well, nothing actually, because nothing is created. But a state arises, which we then interpret as evil. So if someone kills one of my children, they bring about the absence of my child illegitimately. And that for me, of course, is punitive. That for me is horrendous. And then obviously there is an evil in the intention behind the murder of my child. But the dying of my child is pure khair. And we have to somehow hive that off and separate that from the murder. So the murder of my child also involves God's creation of death for my child. But that is separate from the murder. This is why I said at the beginning, you know, there are things here which involve qadar as well, you know, and we haven't actually discussed qadar. That is a different issue, but that is, it's something which intersects with the notion of shar. And again, we have to be very careful about that. If we want evidence that that abstract states such as evil are not created, we can look at Quran, because when Quran talks about darkness, for example, which is an absence, which is a non-being, Allah does not use khalaqa for darkness. He uses ja'ala. So it's quite clear that abstract states which involve non-existence are not created, but they are somehow brought into being. They have an external reality, even though they have no external existence. So Allah talks about ja'ala when he talks about the zulumat, you know, the darkness. So it's actually quite clear for us that evil exists, it has a reality, but it's not created, it's not makhluk.
And you said that what is evil is that our actions are disobedience, right?
For me personally, true evil is the evil which is brought about by disobedience, yes. By not complying with the divine decree.
In the comments, I see Brother Wazir, he's saying exactly the same thing. Earthquakes and floods are not evil, but the sins and our sins and disobedience to Allah.
Yeah, I would agree.
I want to, you know.
May I Omar, may I say something there? Sure. We can perhaps generalize that notion of disobedience. That the Ash'ari said that evil is what God declares to be evil, and good is what God declares to be good. And human beings cannot know what is evil and God, but through revelation, through being guided to what is good and evil by God. And that, of course, brings us to the notion of disobedience, because if we were to commit what God says or declares to be the evil, that is the evil in what we are doing. And if we follow what God declares to be good, that is our obedience. And the Maturidis said that we can actually know what is good and what is evil. So there was a small disagreement or difference of opinion between the two madhabs, two Sunni madhabs of aqidah, theology. However, this can also be reconciled in the sense that when Maturidis say we can know what is good and what is evil, what they are saying is through experience, by looking into at the cosmos where we live and following signs that we find in it, we can know, and what we know, what we find out corresponds to what God says is evil and what God says is good. Now, if we think that both revelation and the cosmos, creation, are forms of, or both the scriptures and the creation are forms of revelation, right? They are actually saying the one and the same thing, ultimately. When we listen to the scripture and when we read the cosmos, we are both reading or listening to God's revelation. So ultimately, they agree that the source of our definition, not the source of evil and good, but the source of our definition of good and evil is God. He is the one who created this system, this cosmos, right? And to the extent that a person recognizes that which God recognizes as good, and that which God recognizes as evil, one's thoughts and heart would become in alliance with the will of God. And to that extent, one achieves happiness in this world. Sometimes we think that something is evil for us, but there is goodness in it. And sometimes we think that there is something is good for us, and there is evil in it for us. Right. So what this refers to is that sometimes we think something is evil, but we don't know the reality of it, and it is good for us. And God knows that reality. To the extent that we can submit our will to God's will, right? Then to that extent, we recognize good and evil in the world, and we can stay on the side of good, and we achieve ultimate happiness.
And just I see a related comment in the comments. Brother Nabi says that you said, evil and good, we don't know whether they are good or evil. And he says, true, and he quotes from, I guess, 25th Flash. Brother Nabi says, true and harmful misfortune is that which affects religion. But misfortunes that do not affect religion, in reality, are not misfortunes.
I'm not sure what that means. What does that mean to say that true and harmful misfortune is that which affects religion? What does anything affect religion?
Meaning, Brother Mustafa maybe can explain. The sins that we commit, our misguidance, our mistakes in this world, our ghafla, our heedlessness, is the one that is real.
Maybe a person's conformity with religion.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And he says that the misfortunes that do not affect religion, in reality, are not misfortunes. Some of them are.
Yeah, I understand now. So if misfortune acts to maybe dissuade us from a particular belief, or tries to push us away from, or it impels us away from belief, maybe, then yeah, that would be true misfortune. Yeah, I can see that now.
I mean, if we can maybe think of an example for it. Let's may God not show that to any of us, but we use the example of a person's child dying, right? So from the point of view of this person who is suffering from the loss of a child, right, it's almost impossible to think of it as something good, right? But perhaps that will bring the person closer to God, increase the person's piety, increase the person's need to take refuge in God's lutf, in God's grace and gentleness, and so on and so forth, and therefore improve this person's religiosity, conformity with the way that God wants us to live our lives in this world. And then on the opposite side, we can think of a person who has been wanting to have a child, and it was not possible for a long time, and eventually God graces this person with a child. But because now that the person has a child, the person stops praying and starts to distance himself from God, because the one thing that he wanted so much in life has become a reality, and now this person is basking in the joy of having that child. But and looking from outside, we would think that this is a good thing. The person now has a child, and that's what he has been wanting all his life, etc., etc. But it's actually bad for him because it is affecting his religion in a negative way. It is moving him away from God. So that which moves us close to God is good. That which moves us away from God is bad from our individual personal points of view. And that's also, that probably we can relate to the hadith about all the affairs of a believer being good and amazing, and in the sense that when there's a calamity that afflicts the person, he or she is patient, and there's good in that for him. And when something good happens, he is thankful and grateful, and there's good in that for him.
Well, as you said, since everything is created by God, everything is has goodness in it. There is one question maybe related to all of them. It says, Brother Wezer asks, is evil an actual being or behavior of the creation? Is evil an actual being or behavior of the creation?
It's neither, I don't think. I don't think it's an actual being, definitely not. It's a result of misguided behavior, or it can be the result.
And I want to clarify one more thing from this example. We said a tyrant, killing a person. That's evil, right? That's apparent evil, and there's goodness in result of it from Allah's point of view. But the fact that a murderer kills that person, and that's an action actually, right? That's an action. An action requires creation, so that the action of killing, maybe stabbing someone, that is created, right? That
Yes.
action is created, but the result of it, the fact that it died, and all the he had thousands of members in his body, all the organs, they died, and millions of cells died, and his emotions and his relatives, all the relations are cut. That's non-existent, right? That's evil. That's destructive.
The creation of the knife going into the body is pure khair, because if you consider what a surgeon does exactly the same thing. A surgeon puts a knife in someone's body, but the context is completely different. So what follows on from the surgeon's putting a knife into someone's body is something purely khair, because that person is then remedied from whatever illness they've had. Whereas a murderer putting a knife into a body, the actual creation of the knife and the body and the bleeding, all of that is khair, because Allah is creating that. But the outcome of that may be shar, because he may die. And it's not the death that is shar there. It is the murder which is shar. And that murder is down to the intention of the murderer. So the evil is in the intention to bring about a state of non-existence. That is what constitutes the evil in that particular context. Another example, which I sometimes use, is it's quite a sensitive example, but we shouldn't feel any shame to use an example like zina. What happens between a man and a woman who are not married when zina is affected is exactly the same as what happens between a husband and wife. The act is the same, but for one of the couples, it is shar. So it's not the actual act, it's the intention. So the act of sexual intercourse, which is created by Allah, is khair. But the outcome for the couple who have intended to commit adultery is shar. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Also, just I received just a new question, and as you said, when you said khair, the question has direction. So the death of the person killed is higher for that person? Is the death of the person killed, I mean, the fact that the person is killed, higher for that person?
Of
Is that
course,
higher?
yeah, of course, because that is that person's time to die.
Yeah, but from your previous example, as you said, it's the intention, right? That's because we said that the actions in itself, since they are created by Allah, they are not evil, but our intention and our disobedience to Allah, that's evil, right? Do I understand it?
If you think about the child example, right? If my child is murdered at the age of 6 or 7, then I should realize that, you know, my child was destined to live for 7 years only, looking at it from a God's eye view, right? And my child's life was given by God and taken by God. Now, the fact that my child's death was mediated by someone else's evil intention is a different issue. We shouldn't confuse the two. So the murderer who took my child's life, na'uzubillah, is a completely different issue from God giving death to my child, which is qadar, and which is my child's destiny anyway. And it's pure khair for my child. Now, I will say that everything connected with this act is evil, obviously. I make a gut reaction judgment. And of course, we don't realize what's good for us or what's bad for us. And of course, for me, that is horrendous. It's the end of my world. So obviously, I'm going to be seeing a lot of things in this context as evil. And that's okay, because we are allowed to play out our insecurities as far as the attribution of evil to Allah is concerned by blaming causes. So this is something else which Ustad talks about. But we're going into the qadar territory here, and I'm not sure how helpful that is to our current discussion, because it's slightly different.
Yeah, and when you said in the last sentence, inshallah, I want to read that as well. And we can finish, inshallah, in a few minutes. If the people of misguidance cause some temporary harm, according to the verse, وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, and the end is best for the righteous. Everlasting reward and profit make up for that damage, And in the case of your example, your child, you know, we lose, you know, many things, and even our children. But we should say, right, وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, the end is for the righteous. And
Absolutely.
everlasting reward and profits, inshallah, reading us. And inshallah, we can take final comments. Mr. Mustafa, any comments on this? In the last
not a comment, but just perhaps to make this more concrete, like we live through this all the time in our lives. Imagine a person getting sick and receiving an injection. Right? It hurts. When you receive the injection, it hurts, but aqibah, the end, is good, inshallah, that being the true injection, etc., etc., you get better. So we are all sick. We are all here in this world living with our nufus, lower souls, that are all sick and that all need injections, that all need training. Discipline requires some sweating. Discipline requires some pain. Discipline requires some perseverance and effort, right? And we put all of that in this world. And if you do it with the good intentions, as Dr. Turner was referring to, if you do it in congruence with God's will, if our intent is to be obedient and to bring our own will in alignment with God's will, right? Ultimately, inshallah, we find ourselves among those who succeed in the hereafter. And that's good, even though we went through lots of injections in this world. If not, if we escape the injection, or if we hold the hand that's trying to give us the injection and hurt the hand that's giving us the injection, if you do something that's against what needs to happen for us to receive that training and achieve the ultimate good result, then we don't achieve it. We find ourselves among those who lose. May God protect us.
So this series seems to be an interesting one. The topic of evil. Inshallah, we will continue for 3 more weeks, inshallah. Professor Turner, can you finish with a dua, inshallah? Can you make,
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. May we all step forward in our pursuit of God knowledge with surety, inshallah.
Jazakallah for joining our session. Yeah, this week I saw many questions and comments in the chat section. You can, inshallah, in the following weeks as well, you can ask your questions or comments. Inshallah, you can do on chat.
It's a very interesting subject, isn't it? It's a very lively subject.
It is, yeah. And I was planning to talk about the other question, but inshallah, we'll talk about that in the next week.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Okay, thank you very much. Salam alaikum.
Hey everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.